We'll get back to the news tomorrow. I just was sitting here and thinking about one of my relatives. We always get to those aggravating anniversaries where it's so interesting how you can think of someone every day, and there will be 2 days of the year where you get it almost in excess. Like you just, I don't know. For me, I just start flashing back to when it happened that morning. Yeah, the thing I always appreciated about him is that he was able to kind of look at things in a nuanced way. Um, we would talk about just jobs, and I was at that time not even really sweating having one. Like I would prefer obviously to be working than not, but it wasn't the end of the world. Oh my God, I'm screwed if I don't have this type of affair that it's been over the last few years. But he would readily admit, oh yeah, when you apply for these places, don't be surprised you don't hear anything back. Just an acknowledgement that even if you do work somewhere, you're still going to need help, um, because of also the high cost of things. Just like the two factors, I should say. Places that when they hire you, it's always this like part time, all over the place, unstable crap. And then if you try to live in one of these apartments or other structures, they have some fixed rate that I would say is fairly astronomical. So with him, it was just nice to have someone that could look at that and say, yeah, it's pretty screwed up. But he was from a period where it really was possible to just work at one place, and then you know be able to get an apartment or whatever. And he just kind of gradually saw how that deteriorated. Yeah, he could be argued as probably one of only two relatives that really took an interest in uh, me drawing. Like I remember he was the one that said I should try realistic stuff, realistic people, which at the time was not something I was comfortable with, because it's a lot easier to just you look at a cartoon or whatever and you can kind of get us an idea of how it would be done if you get like the proportions and like different shapes and sizes. They're a lot more simpler than a real life human being. And then when you factor in just if you're drawing a real life person, all the different shapes of eyes, and if they're smiling or frowning, how the face contorts, it can get a little difficult. But he had the distinction of being the first person I drew. Like I'd never even drawn myself before drawing him. Now he had very few blind spots. Like I think he was another one of these people where they grew up in that period where stuff was simpler. Not necessarily easier, but it was a lot more straightforward. There weren't as many, games and scams and tricks. Good example of that is that woman thing. Like, because I remember when I was, like of adolescent age, you were like, oh yeah, next year you'll, meet some girl, and I would always just kind of start rolling my eyes. And I think that, he was someone who saw the internet come into play, but never really had to use social media and didn't really kind of get to witness the transformation, right? To where people just don't even talk to someone in real life. They're more inclined to just go on these websites and sit on there all day. So for him, it still seemed like it was attainable to just meet someone and actually develop something. And I have always disputed that. Not even just because of my own experiences, but also the statistics that have come out over the last few years with regard to men having, being in such low number in terms of having a romantic partner. So that was really one of the few areas where I don't think he was able to comprehend it or to accept, yeah, this is just not attainable anymore, or at least if it is, it's in an extremely short supply. And to be fair, I've noticed that with a lot of people who are like, I would say of adult age, when the computer stuff, when social media really started taking off in like 2010, 11, right, where the people who were, let's say, in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, they're remnants of a bygone era where you could actually see someone who would say, hey, I'm bored. Let's go and drive around here, or let's go to the mall, or let's go get something to eat. You don't see that anymore. Now it's just a bunch of people sitting on screens, and that's really unfortunate, because you're seeing that desire to just have those basic human interactions wither. I don't know. I think there's a big difference between, someone exiting another person's life because of like an argument, or they move away, and then dying. Like, again, this is just my perspective, but in living with someone, multiple people for years, seeing them every day, going places with them, once they're no longer in your life, and it's not because you did something to them or they wanted things to be that way, but simply because of just the unfortunate occurrence of death. For me anyway, I can still see them. I can still picture them standing next to me. From time to time, I'll think of what they would say about this, that, or the other. And it's really just a matter of almost a sort of, because I said before, I am religious. I don't know if I would tie it directly to that. I think it's more having to do with like a general spirituality of just, hey, what would this person think of this? And it's not even like, oh, I'm hallucinating. Like, I believe this person who is not there is there, but just sort of in a way it kind of, I guess if you want to call it a coping mechanism, you could call it that. Just a way to keep them around in a sense. But no, he was the start of that downward spiral in terms of, because I've had, people I've known pass away, prior to that, but that was the first one. And it's I know it can happen multiple times, because it has since, where you just kind of have that, as I've said before, that emptiness, and I'm not going to do any kind of talking about the suicidal stuff, but I do think it's interesting how a person can breathe, can, just be healthy in like a general sense of keeping themselves well put together in terms of what they eat and if they exercise, etc. But then their desire and their willingness to just do their day-to-day activities really withers away. Because they see things and how frustrating they are and how disillusioning they can be, and they're like, yeah, this is not exciting. Do I really want to live another 20, 30, 40 years without this person? No. And then, as I said before, at least if there was like something to supplement it a little bit, like, hey, okay, I had this unfortunate thing happen, but I have a wife and I have kids, and like there would be like something to look forward to. With him, it really was the start of just, you will gain nothing and lose everything. I guess if there's one saving grace, he'll always be that representation of a better era. I had things that made me upset back then, but they weren't, as I said before, the end of the world. And at least at that time, there was still a feeling and a knowing that I was around people who actually cared if I was alive or dead. And I guess I can be thankful to him for that I expect the computer people to do the whole, or the computer clowns and the assortment of characters just be like nasty for no reason. But I'll never think it's not pathetic when you have relatives who will swear up and down how much they care about you, and all they can do is run their mouths. And at the same time as that's going on, they're not missing a meal. They're not, freaking out about, oh my God, what if I can't get my car fixed or whatever. Just so it really, it's nice to have been around someone, and, two people who were willing to both say these types of things and assist with those types of things, those utilities. And that's why no matter how much people try to claim this is just how things have to be, I won't believe it, because I remember a time where it wasn't that way. So yeah, I try to have some witty way of concluding these things, but this is one time where I can't.